how to stand out in secondhand is definitely a question I probably like subconsciously or subliminal to myself was probably asking myself a lot of the time. I think the main thing you have to look at is what does it actually mean to stand out? And the first thing I would kind of look at is what's the opposite of standing out? It's blending in. So when we blend in, we look the same as everybody else. You know, I know this is like obvious info, but we look the same as other people. We're doing the same as everybody else. And there's actually nothing wrong with doing the same as everybody else if you don't want to stand out. So when I think about standing out, the first focus I have as probably a visual and a creative person is the aesthetic. So the way that you display your products. Are you using models? Are you using flat lays? How are you being standout-ish? How are you being different with that approach compared to what is on the market? Like one real good tip for anybody who wants to actually stand out, go on a platform like the Depop's, like the eBays, like the, not Vinted as much for this, but go on anywhere where there's a comparable competition for you, like Depop, so you can see lots of people quickly. Look at what the general theme of people are doing. There's that underlying thing where if a lot of people are doing the same thing, then it probably means that there's a success out of it. However, on the other side of that, I would say that a lot of people doing the same thing means that there's just a lot of comparable blending. You just get put into this big blender of an app and people assume you are all the same seller, which is fine if you don't want to stand out. So when I started the brand, one of the big things I did was I used models from the get-go. And the reason I used models was because I like the personal element of shooting people and photographing people. At the time, I was happy to absorb that cost into what I did. I didn't worry about that side of things too much. Not that there was like an excessive amount of money available to do it. It was just that I got friends, I got people, would go out on a night out and see somebody who I thought looked cool, and I'd approach them, and I would see people based on how I could see them wearing the clothes I was selling. And that is probably why I had this find cool models, find cool clothes ethos and ideology, because throughout life I just did that as like a natural thing. And I never tried to do that in order to stand out as such. I just did that because that was what I wanted to do, and what I did stood out because not a lot of people were doing that at the time. So when using models, I ended up starting with probably the first couple of years shooting on an abandoned or a very lightly used steam train rail line, and it just was a cool aesthetic. My whole thing was, where can I shoot some people that has a consistency, that I can do it continuously, and also that nobody else is doing. And I liked that whole process of, I want to do what somebody else isn't doing, because if we're all selling similar products and there's a difference to how it looks, then I'm going to stand out. And if I stand out to the right people, then they'll invest in it. But you have to also take a risk, because the reason why people will do the same approach with secondhand, or the reason why people will have the same aesthetic, is because it's safe. The same way not using models is safe. There's a big argument that I'll probably do in another video about whether flat lays are better than models or how both of them actually compare. But realistically, standing out in secondhand is all about making an impact and making someone's first impression of you different to that of somebody that isn't standing out. So the aesthetic is probably the biggest one I would say to begin with. The aesthetic is definitely the one area that I focused on a lot. I came from a very visual background. I was, studied at university, media production, and worked with aesthetic and worked with image and all that sort of stuff. I'd spent a lot of time in life focusing on that. That was one of my callings to it. But Other ways you can stand out by selling secondhand, is outside of the aesthetic, is the approach to the delivery. So lots of people basically upload products to the internet, to websites, based on many other factors. So somebody that runs a website will list products with a certain title and a certain description because the SEO, the search engines optimization of things, will help rank that higher. However, if you're somebody who is wanting less of that approach and more of a standing out on face value, you could alter the way that you display products in their titles and in their descriptions. This is a tangent actually, but the biggest thing that I think helps people stand out in secondhand is that first feel you get for the brand, for the person, for the whole thing. When you see that store, whatever it's called, whatever their logo is, however they have that first thing, when you see them, that's that first impression where you're like, I like this. Or you go, another store that's doing white backgrounds, or another people who are doing this. Like, unfortunately for us, because we are in this overstimulated but highly saturated industry of this so much of the same, if you don't stand out by doing something different, the response of people will just become like robotic. And there is still a big obvious success with people who go for the simplistic approach. But I guess, do you want to sell secondhand from a 2-dimensional perspective or a 3-dimensional? Are you just trying to sell this to make that, to then just sell this to make that? Or are you trying to sell this to make that, to create this? And I think once you add the create element of something else that you're trying to do within it, you can question it. When I used models, I was trying to give people a good feeling. I used models for, I would say, 90% of the brand's time. And the only reason that I stopped using models was, unfortunately, because I couldn't afford to do it at the time. I'd built up this pedestal of using people through agencies, through modeling agencies and all this sort of stuff. And then I ended up doing my own castings, and the people that I ended up using were people that I considered friends. However, I still valued their time and still paid them because it was a company that was running it and things. But unfortunately, I couldn't fulfill that. I have like a premises and stuff like that. So when you're starting out, I think the standing out thing should be one of your biggest things about how you want to stand out. Whether it's like your brand name, whether it's your logo, whether it is the products and the aesthetic. I think that standing out in secondhand is really important, because you're not going to stop how fast people are uploading and adding new products. But I think that you can definitely have more of an imprint on your first impression to other people with how your store looks, how you are represented, and how you're representing yourself. So yeah, that's how I think standing out in secondhand is. This is an interesting one, actually. This has taken me in my mind quite a few places, but all of these videos are bite-sized bits into much more extensive topics, which in the new year, I'll be excited to announce something even more cool as well. But yeah, I'll see you again tomorrow, guys. Appreciate you all as always.